That's it.
So, Andy, you heard what Simon had to say.
Well, I think it's fair, first of all, to say that, you know, in the broader scheme of things, in many ways, Simon and I aren't as far apart as some people that we both have debated might be. So there are those who would like to see a grand populist democracy in Europe, and Simon's proposal is perhaps the most conservative of democratizing proposals for Europe, very carefully couched as sort of like a democratic reformer in early 19th century Britain might have imagined democratic reform at that time. And rightly so, I might add. But still, I think there are important differences, not just of practice here, but of principle between us. We agree that the EU is largely procedurally democratic, and that what it lacks in direct, participatory, contested, populist democracy, it makes up by stronger protections of checks and balances, federalist decentralization, implementation on the local level, constitutional protections that make sure that issues are dealt with by member states. The question then is, it's true that we might imagine a world in which we have more direct electoral contestation of European issues. Why not? And I think the conventional view in Europe about why not is that for some reason, and it's a view shared in a subtle way by Simon, that in some ways voters are not focused enough on European issues. Now, some people have naive proposals to focus voters. Back when Europeans were debating the Constitution, they wanted to have websites that directed European voters to look at European issues. People often blame the politicians for being cynical and manipulating voters, and they want to exhort politicians to be well-meaning. Simon has, I think it's fair to say, a sophisticated proposal for doing this, which is to create a horse race between two parties, much like the parties at home that voters might recognize. But I believe that there is an inherent problem with seeking to do this. And that is that the issues that Europe faces are not salient in the minds of voters. Now that's different than saying that they're unimportant. Of course the issues that Europeans face in Europe are important issues. But many issues that people face in modern democracies are important, but not salient. That means they're of great consequence, but voters can't focus on them enough to be informed and generate stable preferences, to organize around them, to educate themselves, and to act in a stable manner. Now, the normal way that democracies handle this issue is to permit voters to vote on salient issues and trust elected politicians then to act on their behalf in the non-salient issue areas. So the salient issues tend to be taxing and spending, social welfare provision, education, law and order, things like that. And then we trust that when we deal with something that's less salient, that politicians will act on the voters, in the voters' interest, subject to a reprisal of voters if politicians do something very extreme. Now, the problem with having any kind of European-specific election is it severs the link between the salient and the non-salient issues. So a European election of any kind, a European Parliament election, a referendum, invites voters to have an election which is entirely about non-salient issues. And then the issue arises, or the matter arises, what motivates a voter to educate themselves, to organize, to mobilize in large numbers, to behave in stable, responsible fashion the way they do when they're addressing issues like social welfare provision or education or policing? And the answer is, and the evidence for this is, that there has never been in European history a domestic, setting aside a few cases of enlargement, a European referendum, a Euro parliamentary election, or a domestic election in which stable voting on the European issue has played a significant role. I'll give you one example. The recent Irish referendum, which couldn't have been, the first one where they voted no, which couldn't have been a more salient opportunity for Irish to express an opinion. An extremely large percentage of Irish people, it's hard to estimate the precise percentage, but somewhere between 50 and 80, voted no for reasons that either had no connection with Europe at all or no connection with reality at all. For example, they thought that the Constitution would force Europeans to, force Irish to be drafted into a European army or something like that. Now my point is, this is not coincidence, it's necessity. It's what must happen if voters are compelled to cast votes about non-salient issues. Now, I would be very worried about this situation in which we trust the indirect democracy of Europe to do the work that we have direct democratic means to do in domestic societies, if I thought that Europe was somehow doing things that are massively outside of what voters want them to do. But both Simon and I agree that's not the case. And look at the issues. I'll close by just looking at the issues he mentioned. The Services Directive. Whatever you might say about the Services Directive, it certainly was the subject of considerable discussion in Europe. And in fact, the quote-unquote elite view was reversed. Probably not good public policy, but good democratic politics. Energy policy or the common agricultural policy, certainly subject to democratic contestation. Immigration policies, in many respects hardly an EU policy at all, but certainly subject to extraordinary democratic constraints. Same with Afghanistan. Bailing out the Greeks is an interesting case, because I actually believe the one area, and here I would disagree with Simon's original statement, I don't believe the EU is quite procedurally democratic. And the one area where I would call it into question, on procedural grounds, is the European Central Bank, which is more independent than any national central bank with no evident technocratic or democratic justification. That is, no justification in political philosophy or monetary economics. And one might question whether a central bank that independent is really a wise central bank for Europe. But that being said, there simply is no reason to believe that voters given a greater choice, or as Simon puts it, voters who are politicized will make wiser choices or choices that are in any way more democratic in a deeper sense than voters who are currently engaged in the indirect national democratic procedures that keep Europe on an even keel.